Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever in the world you are joining us from. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Mario Picon. I'm the director of the Governance Action Hub. I'm also a lecturer in international development at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. And welcome to my house. This is where the magic happens most of the working day. Where I have the opportunity to talk to many of you, like in this occasion, to discuss about the development challenges in different parts of the world, to connect as a first entry point many times before we're able to join you, have more in-depth conversations in different countries around the world. I want to acknowledge several things today. First of all, I want to welcome everyone that is joining us also through the live stream in LinkedIn. I'm also very excited to know that this is the first streaming that we're doing at this time of the year. And as many of you already know, we changed the time because we got a lot of emails from many of you asking us actually to see if there is a way to participate more because of the time. So we actually were able to separate the physical class at Maryland from the online version. Before we begin, I want to pause and acknowledge something extraordinary that honestly it left me a bit like catching my breath. We currently are 539 people registered from around the world and tuning in from 118 countries. It's not a course what we're doing really here. And I want you to understand and to assimilate that. This is a global room. Let's use it. Let's make the most out of it. This is not just about a class, as we have discussed in the past. This is an opportunity to contribute. And we will provide the tools and the space for many of you to raise your voices, to promote and generate new ideas around how to tackle concrete, complex development challenges. You are at a disadvantage by like from the start. Why? Because you have to depend a lot on me as an instructor. I have tons of limitations, including the funny pitch of my voice to the fact that my English, as Celia Cruz used to say, is not very good looking. All right. So I apologize in advance if some of the ideas do not come with the crispness and clarity that they require because how important they are. But that is how and why, maybe aside of this particular lesson, we are going to have a lot of interaction in spaces for you to speak, for you to write and send us questions and comments, and for you to interact with guest speakers. But here's the thing that I'm asking from you. You also need to contribute towards the solution. There are so many fora out there where we focus on diagnostics and just raising issues, raising the problems. That is extremely important. We cannot do anything if we don't understand the problem first, right? But we're going to try whenever possible to focus on, okay, this is very difficult. This is a problem. We have been dealing with this for decades. What is it that we can do concretely, even if it is small, to move us forward? Now, I know some of you have been here since the first session. Others are joining for the first time because we shifted the schedule. Whether you are returning or new, you belong here. This space is for you. Take it, reclaim it. I want to just start with a couple of logistics issues. First of all, Alessandra Granelli and Tracy Jaiste are joining us today. So please feel free to say hi. Alessandra and Tracy, can you just intervene just for a moment to say hi to the crowd? It would be great if you turn on your camera so they get to know you.
Hi,
Please.
everyone.
Alessandra, go ahead.
So very nice to meet you, everyone. It's so great to see such a global community. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
Where are you joining us from, Alessandra?
Oh, I'm from Rome, Italy. Yeah.
Rome, Italy. Bellissimo. Welcome here. Thank you for helping us. So you're going to see Alessandra a lot during the next few weeks. And also Alessandra takes charge of all communications related to the class. So please feel free to reach out to her too. Tracy, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to have all of you join us today. I'm Tracy Jooste. I'm the Associate Director of the Governance Action Hub. I hail from Cape Town, South Africa, but I am speaking to you from Maryland in the United States, and really looking forward to engaging with all of you through the course of the semester. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tracy, from awesome South Africa. And thank you everyone that has returned too. I mean, like I see many names that are familiar from the first few sessions. I'm very thankful that you guys are making the effort to continue here. And I know that it's difficult. Some people cannot join us at this time anymore that we're in our time zone. But we have been trying to reach out to many of them just so we don't lose them, because this is not about only the online classes. It's also about what happens in between and the asynchronous collaboration that we're trying to promote. I see also a few like familiar names that I haven't heard from in a while. Hi, Tania Alfonso, good to see you with us. Wihenwa Kinja, welcome from DRC. Anurada, thank you for coming back. Fantastic. I hope that the time is also working for you. Anyways, so here's the point, guys. This space works only if people are actually feeling seen, right? Not as titles, not as sectors, but as practitioners, students, civil servants, actives, researchers, community leaders navigating very real constraints in very real places, okay? So whenever you're joining from today, first time or already for the third time, all right? Nairobi, Lima, Manila, DC, Bogota, London, you're part of a shared inquiry here. How do we reclaim development in a fractured world? All right, so let's get started. Okay, so this is the agenda for today, right? This is what we're proposing for today. So first of all, we're going to recenter our collective journey. We're going to talk just a little bit in the first few minutes about the overarching arc of the class. We're going to try to respond to your feedback, some of the feedback that we got from the first two lessons. We actually have a presentation that we're going to share with you so you know how is it that we are proposing that we explore some of the questions and comments and issues that you raised during the first two sessions. We will do this every 2 or 3 sessions, just as a way to reorient our compass, right? Like how is it that we're doing? How is it that we can respond better also to this space, to the opportunity of this space? Then we're going to talk a little bit about like synthesis of lessons 1 or 2. I'm just going for the quick messages here. Don't worry, I'm not going to go over a whole lesson and lecture again. But here are the core points for today. First of all, we're going to talk about strategic positioning. We're going to go beyond theories of change. Theories of change, as we discussed already, are a very useful tool, but they are very limited also by our own biases, our ideologies, our history, a legacy that is very deep in development. So when we talk about strategy as positioning in a moment, you can think, for example, about how is it that we have used evidence over time. Evidence is a very important and strong and powerful tool for positioning, but it's not enough, as we're going to learn, right? Like probably you already know, and you can just bring your experience here. And we're going to connect that conversation with the challenge of individual behavior, trying to understand that in the end, we need to tackle complex challenges by also understanding that we all are complex individuals. We're going to have a breakout exercise with a few questions that we are posing to the online participants today. I hope that you find it engaging, interesting. We're going to talk about it too. During that breakout room for the streaming part of this, I'm just going to make a quick summary of what is the intention of this, what is the end goal, right? Because this is not about the class, it's not about certificates, it's about contribution. So I'll talk a little bit about that while the people online are actually working on their breakout exercises. They have probably already heard about this, or they can go to the page of the course and learn more about it, right? And we're going to connect how is it that we introduce in that understanding, that new understanding about the people that are key to a reform, to an intervention, to a program, into building strategies, right? And we're going to finalize, hopefully, with an inspiring message that may actually bring you back in a week when we're going to be talking about stakeholder engagement. We're going to talk about hats. What happens with the guy in the private sector? How do we engage them? Do they want to be engaged? What happens with civil society when they may be pursuing in the same territory two completely opposite goals? Maybe environmental protection, and on the other hand, just protecting and generating more jobs. We're going to be talking about governments next week, right? Like in the people in governments, bureaucracies, parliament, leaders in public leadership within governments. So that just as a preview of what we're going to be seeing next week. And in 2 weeks, we will have our first panel with guest speakers, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how that is going to develop very soon. All right. So that is the chart in the course. You probably see, I hope that everybody can see it, this learning arc that we have proposed for the semester, where we're going to go from different phases. Hopefully you notice that it's not your average course in that sense, right? We're going to try to go, and it's very difficult to just summarize all these different years and experience and development in just a couple of weeks. But we already went through the history and aid architecture, right? And many of its challenges today. We are going to start moving, and we're moving already today with rational choice, individual behavior, and how do we work within systems, right? And with systems. Towards then, it will be in 2 weeks, we're starting the discussion about working directly with systems, governance, evidence. How do we position a conversation? We're going to start refining and building strategies over time. And then we're going to have like a whole exercise of application and about the future. What is the future of the field? What is the future of the development profession? What is the application or a lot of things that we have been doing on two contextual challenges, democracy and climate. Okay, so before we move on, is there any question that anybody would like to raise, or any question on the chat, Alessandra or Tracy, that you would like, that you think that we should address right away? Nope. All right, I'm gonna assume that no. Tracy, what do you think?
No, Mario, just really good to see people joining for the first time and other people coming back. So there are no questions. I think we ready to launch into the lecture.
Fantastic. All right, so let me start first with this. I'm gonna just move here. I guess I have to move the whole thing. Just want to move the bar that I have over here somewhere when I'm sharing the screen here. Perfect. So this is a little bit about like answers, or like the way that we are looking at a lot of your feedback from the previous 2 weeks that we had. Okay. So remember, we are defining this as a conversation in terms of an exploration, a journey into the unknown, if you want. Partially because we're trying to revise also how useful the old maps, the old ways of doing things are, and how do we build over them. We're not just trying to throw them away, like the old goals and the old tools. They are helpful. But how is it also that over time, we are actually discovering a new word, partially because we have been able to define and change the way that we approach the goals of development over time. Even though it may feel that many times we're with the same kind of development strategies of like 20, 30, or 40 years ago. We're not. There's a lot of more like nuanced conversation going on, and an exploration from different leaders around the world, maybe some of them right here in the room, that do and will be looking at new ways to tackle development that are centered on people. Because it's very difficult, it's very different if we focus as our overarching goal growth, right, and the kind of tools that are attached to that particular overarching goal, than if we center or we make agency, for example, our goal. So in terms of like some of the things that we have heard, right, we heard a little bit about theories of change, and the idea of, for example, how is it that you build theories of change for issues of backsliding of democracy in Central America, right? Like, so we can always go to the lecture on theory of change, and we actually provided a few tools to look into this. How is it that this could be applied, and how is it that evolution has occurred in thinking around how a particular line of work, example, microfinance, right, like was seen 50 years ago compared to the kind of iterations and ecosystem approach to it in the last few years, right? So, but for example, GVF, those were the initials that you use in your registration. I don't know if you're connected, you will see this, right? Like, if you would like, right, and we find others that are interested in having conversations of co-creation on issues of democratic advanced lending in Latin America, particularly in Central America, we'll be very happy to like have those conversations like on the side of the course. Or if you, for example, want to focus this exercise that we're going to have week after week specifically on that issue, please use the platform and reach out if we can help in any way. All right? Is that the same offer goes to others too? Like the key thing is not what we can do for you about that, but it's like how is it that together and through the group we may have the kind of conversations and explorations that we may not have the opportunity to organize on our own from our own country and given our own responsibilities. Use the platform. Anurada, I mean, I was telling us very much about theory of change and most significant change, right? How this helps in terms of evaluation synthesis and program development. So here, for example, first of all, we're going to have a whole session on evidence, not only a full session as evidence as a tool precisely for positioning, right? We're going to be looking at some old, recent, new approaches also to look at evaluation into evidence. In particular, I like a lot, because I have had the opportunity to interact with them a lot, the work of Florencia Gersovic, of Tom Aston, for example, who have been, especially Tom, collaborating in the past, and they are pushing the agenda on these particular points. For example, there's a lot of experience also from USAID, and we have Tania Alfonso there, so maybe at some point we can convince her to share a bit more of her work and what they have been doing. No compromise, my friend. Don't worry. But it's like we can chat about this more, right? So I'm just gonna go really quick through this, right? Like this discussion that Ana Beatriz, for example, was raising about logical framework or theories of change, right? Like, but it is very important that we understand that distinction, right? Like between a log frame, very much as a accountability tool that tends to be in the nature and the way that is structured as linear, because it makes our lives easier and we like easy, right? More related to the question of like, are we actually doing things right? Compared to the theory of change as a causal pathway model, right? Like more connected to the question of about where are we doing the right things. So the key thing is that many times we end up testing what happens about a program based on the theory of change, rather than understand that the theory of change is a theory and needs to be alive, and maybe we need to change it. That was the whole point when we started to do theories of change. But sometimes we tend to treat it as in the old ways we treat log frames, and that is a problem too. And that is a mindset, that is a mental change that needs to occur. In many places is already occurring, of course, right? Like, but it's not about correcting that behavior or changing it completely. It's about being aware of it, right? And being able to react over time. Institutions and justice, like Martin made this very strong comment, I mean, like, which is completely understandable, right? Like social justice, rule of law are basically impossible, right? Our dreams in parts of the global south for different reasons. And that is a perception that I completely understand, right? Like, and sometimes I think about the situation in the country where I was born, in Peru, and I'm like, this is absolutely impossible, right? And I get very frustrated about it, of course, right? Like, but it is true also that we need to start thinking a little bit, what is it that we're talking about, right? Like, is social justice really a framework, or is it an ultimate goal that we're pursuing? And then are we using the right tools to pursue that in any case? And what is rule of law, aside of basically one particular definition of a system in which you work, that we have turned it very much over time into an aspiration, right? Like into a goal in itself. But rule of law may be serving certain particular interests too, right? Like, so the point is like, how do we make a rule of law that is responsive, right? Like to a goal that is higher in terms of level. A rule of law that facilitates culture in cultural evolution and change over time, right? Like rather than simply enforcing contracts. Okay? Which are a good thing, by the way. I'm not saying that they are not. Of course, politics of aid, right? Like perceived neutrality, right? And discussions about the critiques of age. So definitely, right? Like here are things like that where we need to start looking a bit more about what many others have already been talking about, like the post-colonial, post-development literature, right? Like particularly, I would say Escobar, right? Like is still very current in that sense and is relevant in terms of understanding what things are currently happening even today. Maybe we're bringing him back in that sense. But also framing a little bit about this discussion of collaborative governance, including when we talk about the multilateral system, right, as a mechanism for redistributing agenda-setting power. So then what is it that we can do to change things, even a small scale, right? Like, and we're going to talk about like the challenges of collaboration a lot during this class, okay? Elana Wong also made a contribution here. We will share all this with you. Sadly, I cannot go in depth with each one. We will take the whole class, of course. But I want you to see that when you send us questions, we actually want to provide every 2 or 3 classes some responses to the things that you are suggesting and inviting you that if you want to take it on you as your class project, right? Like we can facilitate the space for engaging into this conversation and connecting you with others that may be interested in the same. Okay? So hopefully that is helpful. And at least we have a few things over here, etc. We have in every single lesson, when we post it the day after, we have a series of references for you to dig deeper, right? Like you don't have to believe what I'm saying over here, right? Like, but basically I show you the kind of literature that we have been using or we connect with, right? And it's not that we buy what one particular person over here in this list is saying, right? Or group of authors are saying. But the point is like, how do you start connecting the dots between many of these issues and many of the things that they discuss? That's a little bit of how we try to do it in any case. All right, so having gone through that, please interrupt me, Tracy or Alejandra or Alessandra. I'm not looking at the chat right now. So if there is something where you think that we should stop and clarify something, let me know. Okay?
Yep, will do. We're all good for now.
Good. And also, if anybody has a question that would like to discuss directly, we're going to have time for that. But if it is urgent or you feel it is urgent, just connect with Tracy and Alessandra to see if we can just stop and just talk about it. I'm just going to make the warning. We have a lot of catch up to do in this class. So this is why I'm probably talking more than what you usually are going to hear me in other lessons, especially when we have guest speakers and we have some of you talking about the issues. But I mean, like we need to go through this exercise of common language. So we are actually speaking the same language and understand some of the same assumptions, at least working assumptions. I'm asking explicitly from you the benefit of the doubt in that sense, because at some point I may say something that you do not agree with necessarily, right? Or that you feel that it should be structured or framed in a different way. That's perfectly fine. And we should have those kind of conversations. That's fine. So for now, let's just go through this particular way of looking at things that we are proposing. Okay? First of all, let me synthesize the core ideas that have been proposed in this class so far. If you think that any of this is controversial, that's okay. We discussed it a couple of weeks ago, but you may actually disagree because you are new to the class. Let us know. We're happy to have that conversation. But just let's take this as working definitions, all right? First of all, instead of trying to fight about the many different definitions of development that have been out there throughout history, all right? Let's aim to just set a working definition where development is a societal effort to pursue goals deemed valuable by a collective. That collective can be the multilateral system. That collective may be a community. That collective may be a territory or a country. All right? It could be parts of a society. Very well. Okay? That's one working definition that we're going to have. The definition of the goal in development matters. It's actually crucial. Growth implies one mindset. Agency implies another. And that is gonna shape very much the tools, the way that we think in our head or on paper about that theory of change to get to that ultimate goal. Third, much of development practice remains shaped by colonial legacies, national economic framings, and/or geopolitics. I don't think that is that controversial, but you will tell me. Okay? 4, across sectors, across different types of stakeholders, right? Even if you may not believe it because you may actually feel that the private sector cannot work towards development goals, or that you feel that my government or many governments or all governments are corrupt and just pursue their own interests. There are in every single type of stakeholder across sectors, actors that are actually actively revising theories of change. From microfinance evolving beyond micro lending to an ecosystem thinking, right? To, for example, how do we look at tackling and preventing intimate partner violence, right? Or how is it that we look and push for quality of education in a particular system? There are everywhere, but we may not know them, and their efforts may not be enough to counter a system that goes in a different direction. And number 5, the weirdest one, maybe the craziest one, change is possible, but only if we rethink both our goals, our tools, right? And what is in between in terms of like what we define as theories of change. And this is why we need something else that we're going to be talking about in this class. We need strategies. Strategies not as business plans, not as plans, no, not as this blueprint, no, but a strategy as positioning. More about that next. For those that missed the previous class, right? Like I spoke a little bit more about this with the UMD students also, the students at the University of Maryland, right? This idea about a strategy, right? Like it's not about a to-do list. It is not about a donor proposal, right? Like it is not a static plan, right? Like it's how do you position yourself under uncertainty in particular, right? We, for example, were discussing and we're proposing for the group a discussion that is going to be centered mainly around issues of democracy and climate action. Why? Right? Like, because in the end, democracy and climate, they are not the only ones, but they are context setting challenges, right? Because you may think about health reforms, education reforms, but that space for people to speak out when things are not working. The efforts and the potential for changing course of action from one administration to another or within an administration, right? Like, or for example, to try to reduce the environmental blueprint when the priorities of many other players may be different because you need to survive, you need to eat, right? Like, so you need to actually engage maybe in illegal mining because it pays a lot, even though it is illegal. And you take the chance because the potential of winnings are so high and you don't have other options necessarily, and you feel abandoned by your state, right? So all these different things affect the way that we do regardless of the sector. So we're proposing, right, and this could be very well discussed, that instead of focusing on several sectors, health, education, nutrition, and all, right, like we look at that work and your own expertise in those sectors within the context, right, of the particular democratic setting, which may offer certain limitations and opportunities, right, and the context of the need for climate action and energy transition out there. More to come, we'll have the space to collaborate on this. But again, I'm doing a recap of before, okay? So we were saying that in the end, democracy, climate, right, like they are not sectors, right? As you may identify health and education, but they are soil. Then when governance fragility increases or the planetary pressures intensify, everything above that destabilizes. So strategy, therefore, is choosing where to stand in a shifting landscape, what behavioral battleground to engage, which coalition to build, what risks to absorb. Okay? Now, let's go to really quick a couple of these slides. Like when we talk about the history of development before this, right? Like we said that we're very much limited because the difference between social sciences and science, right, is that in science, typically what dominates is not only, but what dominates is the scientific method. So in the scientific method, you are actually open, and in a way, you are looking for like things that deviate to what you believe, because that will move us forward. You are looking for the limitations of your prevailing theory. Remember from Newton, right? Like how do we move into the theory of relativity? And now we're talking about quantum. In each one of those jumps, there was resistance, but there was also openness to proof. And that changed the equation. But in 50, 60 years of development, we have not really have that 70. We haven't really had those big jumps. It has been much difficult to change your mind, to evolve in many ways. It happens, but at the macro level, it has been much slower. It has been sped up though in the last 15 to 20 years, partially because of certain geopolitical global events too, right? Like that have necessarily forced us to change a little bit the way that we think. If anybody's familiar with this great book from Adam Grant, Rethinking, right? Or Think Again, that's the name. Like he has a very useful framing, right? Like in terms of mindsets. Are we thinking like the scientists? And this is exactly the whole point, right? Like the scientific method, the idea that we are probably wrong, right? We're using this as a theory because this is what we understand and is working right now. But if it doesn't work, we're willing to revise that. Or are we acting as politicians or as preachers or as, and I forgot the third one. If somebody remembers from the book, please put it on the chat box. And turns out that in social science, particularly in economics and in development in general, right, we tend to be a bit like politicians or preachers more than scientists, right? I'm not saying let's all turn science into science, like social sciences are not science, but it's about the mindset, right? And how is it that we're able or not to change the chip from one thing that may have worked for us. Maybe if you are from Peru, originally from Peru like me, you may have the image, like in the understanding that a structural adjustment worked really well in the 90s, right? So we just have to keep going through that and take it to the extreme, right? But times change and the needs change and the goals cannot be the same because it's not the same what we were in Peru in the early 90s than where we are now or where we were in between before the whole crisis that is going on right now over there. Okay, just as a reference, sorry, and I don't want to be. If you want more information, everything is detailed in this slide the slide deck that are shared on our website for the course, right? And also a comprehensive list of literature that has been used for this, all right? I just wanted to show off the slides, so that's why I'm going through them, okay? So, first, I need to talk a little bit about strategy before we move to the exercise, okay? First, think about any reform, okay? Reforms stall, even when evidence is strong, design is sound, resources are mobilized, and stakeholders agree. Why? Because human behavior is not frictionless. We talk about the importance of friction in the first class. Individuals are not only utility maximizers, they are not this weird definition or simplification that we have put out there to make our lives easier, many ways, as academics or practitioners of rational. It's not as simple as saying humans are rational. Individuals are identity-driven, norm-constrained, and bandwidth limited. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about scarcity in a moment, right? Like in how this bandwidth affects us. But let me just quickly go through these slides, which are going to be also available for all of you, right? Like, we talk about democracy and soil. I just want to walk through this really quick. These are the assumptions for democracy and climate, right? Like, and what is it that we have to keep in mind? So I use three main resources for the discussion on what is a strategy, okay? So you can go back to them anytime. You don't have to buy the book. You can actually look online. There's a lot of very good information online to give you a sense of where these guys are going. But aside of the long list that I'm going to give you, all right, look at these three different resources, all right? One of them is not maybe what you expected, okay? So I very much use, in the way that I look at the strategy throughout this class, right, the framework to discuss power and systems that Duncan Green uses in his book, How Change Happens. I very much go back to the reflections on adaptation from Michael Woolcock from the World Bank. Great guy, had the opportunity to meet him years ago. But also many others, right? Like, but if I have to pick one particular reflection or framework for that conversation, I'm going to go with Michael. Michael also had a collaboration with Matt Andrews and Lam Pritchett a few years ago on a building capability within the state. And we're going to talk a little bit about that next week, all right? But third, the angle that is a bit less usual, because typically we're used to frames from economics or anthropology in development economics, in international development in general, right? Like, is the idea of a strategy as positioning in Seth Godin. And Seth Godin is actually a marketer, all right? But it turns out that sometimes if we look into other areas, there are many worthy ideas to keep in mind and that are help us to understand why things don't flow many times in the things that we do in development. And something similar that we're going to be exploring also is the idea, for example, of finite and infinite games, which has typically been used more in issues related or discussing first strategy in general, business strategy in particular, right? Or even geopolitics. But this idea of positioning, of having a strategy that actually can resist the test of the challenges that we know that are coming our way, right? Like, is something that we're going to emphasize a lot in this class. Okay? So before we actually are thinking about the intervention, right? Like, we need to understand the problem that we're trying to tackle and what is the current ecosystem, right? The ecosystem that we are dealing with and the ecosystem that we need to build over time. And it will take time, right? Like, for change to actually happen. It's not just a technical solution, a mechanistic process. That is part of the problem. We are used to a mindset in which we are based on Newtonian Cartesian science, right? Like, where we're thinking about determinism, we're thinking about mechanistic approaches, right? Like, that a force that causes something, it causes a reaction immediately, right? But maybe, like, many of the problems in development reflect more like a quantum kind of thinking, right? Like, where you may actually have all these different complex reactions in things over time that may actually hinder the possibility of change. We need to be aware of that, okay? When we build a strategy, also we have to answer the big question, right? Like, is what we are proposing fundable or is it durable? Is it resilient to political turnover? Is it rooted in local legitimacy? Does it adapt to climate shocks, right? And chances are it's going to be messy and hard to measure. But many times we depend also of other actors right, including donors, academics, and all, that may have a different outlook, right, on how to tackle the problem. Because in the end, not because they are bad people or because they are not smart, but because we have held, myself included, right, a mindset that holds us back, that actually is more based on short term than in long term. That is based, for example, on a system of 3-year donor cycles or strategies that uses linear metrics, that has to be technically sound, whatever that means, right? And that actually avoids political friction. No, we don't want to get into politics. But guess what? Development is political. I probably don't have to tell you that. But how does the system respond to that? How is it that we're constrained by that too? And most importantly, what do we do about it? How do we influence it? Maybe this class is a jumping point for that. I wish. Okay? Then understanding in the end what anchors our work. Law, community ownership, could be revenue, data, right? Like narrative power. Because these things help us position the reform, the intervention, the programming, the ecosystem as a combination, a set of different actions. Okay? Ask yourself that question. If you must build a development initiative for the problem that is close to your heart, that you have been working for years, or that motivates you to study development, right? Like, if you must build a development initiative on this problem that survives 10 years, political cycles, climate shocks, what should be the foundation of it? Think about it. Okay, so these are some takeaways from that particular thing, right? But let me just give you some framework here, just to end, so we can move to the engaging part, which is the most fun part, including for myself, about complex behavior and how it connects with this idea of a strategy that we are promoting, building, etc. Okay? So we were saying that in the end, individuals are not only driven by an intention of maximization utility, or by the typically limited understanding that we have of the word incentives. People are more complex than that. They are identity driven. People not only want, of course they want shelter, they want food, right? Like we all want security, a sense of security, right? But what happens that these three things, at least, that are in most law classes, the foundations of what is called a social contract, right, for having a government in general, are not happening, right? It's not only a technical problem, or it's not a political electoral problem only. It generates a trust problem. And then when you have a trust problem where that social contract is broken or is perceived as broken from one part or from both parts, right? The other things that people crave, all of us, okay? You think about it, even yourself, including issues like status, like a sense of belonging to a particular tribe. They are stronger. They take many times precedence, even over some of the basic needs. Why? Because those beliefs, that position that you hold in society, or that belonging to a particular tribe, any kind of group, right? Like the people that are socially conservative, or people that are very much religious focused, or like people that consider themselves as super liberal, right? Like, and that there is a particular way of being liberal or conservative, okay, that you have to subscribe with, so you are in a way part of that club, okay? That belonging, that need for belonging, it defines a lot of our actions and our attitudes. Think about it. So what do we do about it in the end? So it is not just the mechanistic thing that we need something as basic as food and shelter or security, basic security, right? Like it is that in the end, regardless if we take that connection with trust or not, we're also driven by this sense of this need for belonging, right? These communities, these tribes in the end. Behavior in the end is embedded in ecological layers. Our behavior is not only defined as our individual, as it's not based on the individual only, it's also based on the microsystem, my household, my neighborhood, and how the people like me, the people like us, think or is supposed to behave. You go from the individual to the microsystem, the household, maybe your neighborhood, the exosystem, more like the community, the region, the area, right? To the macro system, which could be the national level or even the international level. Urban people in most countries, right, like have a particular outlook on things, on understanding success and progress that is not necessarily the same as people in rural areas. Maybe you think that things are very different between Latin America and Africa. In some cases they are, in others not so much, right? We share a lot of like own biases too, and also many of their own challenges too. So if we misunderstand behavior, and this is the point that I want to leave for you, we misdesign the strategy. So just a couple of points that I want to make on these particular approaches to understanding the individual, right? Like I take a lot from a great book by Mulainathan and Ashraf. The second last name is escaping me right now. I'm sorry. On scarcity. They have a great framework for discussing this based on tunneling. Maybe my only critique, right, like, is that in the way that is so focused in trying to focus on the poor, in particular, of this category, this name of the poor, like it may actually feel or convey the message that the poor are irrational. When part of the point is that we're all, if not irrational, not only rational based on that particular definition. We crave all this. We crave attention, even if we were maybe a bit introvert. We crave to belong. We crave a status, one way or another. But you know what maybe even we crave even more? And tell me if I'm wrong. We all want to be right. And the challenge with that, because that is not going to change. I'm not telling you, do not ever believe that you have to be right or that you are right. No, that's not the point. You need to be aware of it. Because if what you want is to be right, if somebody tells you that you are wrong, that what you have been doing have actually potentially even damaged or hurt people, you are not just going to say, yes, you're right. You are going to defend your position, at least first. Any similar or similitude with what is currently going on in the moment is not a coincidence. Okay. So I just want to make sure that actually you are going to have all these materials so you can go through them and the resources that hopefully will help. This framework of individual microsystem ecosystem that comes actually from work in the last century of Lori Heise, this brilliant academic that has been working on issues particularly related to intimate partner violence. I had the opportunity of working with her at some point in a project a few years ago. And I learned a lot from like this particular framework, right, for understanding. If you think about strategies for intimate partner violence prevention, for example, right, like very well studied, like SASA in Uganda and many other programs around the world, right, like while the challenges persist, of course, like most success has been found, especially when you integrate interventions in a way that consider these different ecological layers. Of course, it makes it more difficult also to evaluate, for example. But that's okay. Also, we are not in evaluation the same way that we were 20 years ago, right? We have definitely expanded our toolkit. There has been much more thinking in the last few years about how do we adapt to this understanding of the problem in a different way, not as a mechanistic challenge, but an ecological challenge. Okay? But also, if you look at these different layers, there's always going to be resistance for the points that I said. Not only because we want to be right, but think about a politician. Let's say that you actually, because we love challenging and criticizing politicians, right? Maybe there is some politicians over here that do not want to say that, oh, I was a politician or I am a politician, right? Because there is immediately this idea that, well, politicians are corrupt, politicians are like this, like that, etc., right? But let's put ourselves in the shoes of somebody that has to deal with the system too, all right? And assume that basic integrities, if you want, right? Like in terms of like supporting something, a particular initiative, you also have to think or tend to think about the next political cycle. Where do I prioritize action, right? Is it in the places where the problem is the deepest and the strongest and the more difficult to tackle or more long-standing? Or is it in areas with more population where I may actually get a political credit? Am I going to get resistance from my constituents? Who's going to lose status here that is going to push me, right? Or is going to make my life impossible? Just think about it, okay? And another very important point when we talk about behavior here comes from Centola. Centola has this book, Change, from 2018, I believe, which for me is brilliant. And you don't have, again, to buy the book. They actually have at the University of Pennsylvania, at UPenn, they have this great website about the book, right? And about the thinking behind the book with case studies and all. You can go and check it out. I'll give you the reference, right? When we send the material. And the point is that it's a response it helps understand many of the things that are happening right now. Before we said, okay, you have a central leader, authority, whatever it is, right? That had all these weak ties, but a strong authority at the center. And then you actually spread the information all around. But what we have when we understand better the challenges of networks is more what happens on the right side of this slide. These strong ties that spread behavior, and that how change many times starts in the periphery, not in the center. Sometimes even the center finds out last that these strong networks at the periphery have been occurring and talking to each other. It's a very interesting framework for understanding the challenges nowadays, particularly with social media, misinformation, disinformation, or good information, right? Like what is it, how is it that we tackle this and we actually spread good evidence-based information, for example. And final concept, which is very useful, but is rarely talked about in public policy classes, is the concept, very basic, of the Overton window. What is possible in a given moment, politically speaking, or in the field in general, in the field of development? Okay? I don't know. Gay marriage in the United States, something that nobody would have talked about or thought that was going to be possible 50, 60 years ago, right? Times change. Times change not just by themselves. They change because people kept working within the system and building buffer. Buffer, in engineering terms, is precisely that space that gives you the opportunity to adapt or change or to respond to a problem. So part of what we're going to be discussing is that how our strategy, particularly when you have a context that is not conducive to change, maybe an authoritarian government, maybe an environment where climate negotiations, looking at the environment, look simply impossible because the power and the money is somewhere else, right? Like, how is it that we can create buffer over time? We're actively going to be discussing this during the class. Okay? So in the end, keep this slide in mind, right? Like, how is it that we architect or we can architect reforms, right? Like around or considering behavior of individuals, right? Like, people are guided by scripts, by the way that they have been thinking, that the people around them think. You have the conditions of an ecological system, all these different layers that condition, like even your voice. People are reinforced by networks, right? Like, it's not about the influencer, the social influencer, right? Like, it's trying to understand what the dynamics of influence are in a particular context, because are not necessarily the same everywhere. And also, we are bounded by scarcity of time, scarcity of food, hunger, right? Like, that condition our the way that we look at the problem and the way that we react, that we act towards it. I'm going to stop there because I know that is a lot of information, guys, but we needed to go through this. Okay, so we can go through these resources. You can send us questions during the week. Like, our ears are open, and as I said, every 2 weeks we're going to make a condensed version of how we are proposing to look at the problem that you raise or the question that you raise. All right, and you will have more of these references out there. Okay, so we're going to go through a very small exercise of 10 minutes. All right, Alessandra is going to help us to send us to rooms. So let me just look at the Alessandra, do you have the questions?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And
If you can share it with them, I'm just on the chat. You can look at the chat. I'm just gonna read through them. Okay. You're
all
gonna
right.
be sent in breakout rooms of 3 people. Okay, each, just small, 10 minutes. I want you to pick one problem. The problem can be a microfinance program, right? And how to improve it, or what is it for, right? Like, an intimate partner violence prevention program, or the task of eliminating oil subsidies. Friends of Nigeria, you can go for that if you want. And then I want you to tackle these 4 questions really quick as a conversation, please. Introduce each other, of course, be civil, right? Like, but I would love if you just have this conversation. The point of this is not to get it right, to be very clear. The point of this is for you to be aware of how other people think about the same problem. And you're going to notice the differences. We're going to come back and we're going to have a conversation about it, right? For other 10 to 12 minutes. The questions are, what is the challenge, right, that we're trying to tackle in the end? What is the behavioral channel that this policy surfaces, or this challenge surfaces? Who is affected, right? Or who is constrained? Basically, who should we be serving? Who is it that we're trying to help here? Third, who supports the effort or who may block it? So who do we need to consider aside of the people that are to be most benefit by the reform or the policy or the intervention? And the fourth question, why will these people that we need for change to happen actually join us? Why will they join? Because it's the right thing to do. I want to see what you get out of this together. And then I'm going to ask a few people to just share their thinking and what you heard from others. So, Alessandra, feel free to send people into breakout rooms. In the meantime, I'm going to be talking to people in the live stream and sharing a little bit about what this course is about and how they can help too. See you in 10 minutes, Tim. Good. Ale, Tracy, anything I should consider before moving forward and sending a message to the people on the live stream?
Oh, just to check, Alessandra, do people have to choose a room or they automatically assigned?
I am changing the title of the room based on the intervention, so people can pick whatever they prefer. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Thank you. This is going to be a good test. It's the first time, by the way, if you are watching this live stream, that we're doing this. This class itself is experimental, and we're going to make tons of mistakes. We are adapting also. We started with a class that was synchronous, like people at the University of Maryland connecting with online participants. But not only the time, but the format was very difficult to respond to many of the questions and the things that were being raised with the online participants. So we broke it, right? But the projects that are going to emerge throughout the class, they're going to be connected. And the students of the University of Maryland are going to reach out to many of the online participants to be able to connect and understand better about their stories, their current and past efforts, right? And their outlook about the future. And what is it that we need to do as a space, as an international development space? This is extremely important. So one thing that I wanted to share with you, right? And I guess that you see right now the faces while we are in these working groups, okay? Just confirming, Tracy, Alessandra, can you see the learning arc slide?
Yes.
Okay, so hear me out here. If you have been connected with this group in this class for the first time, or you are coming back, just as a refresher of why is it that we're doing this, it's not about the class. The class will give you tools, instruments. It will build capacity. But the whole point of this is the contribution part. How do you contribute? So we have actually built like a whole Miro board, a shared Miro board, right, as an initial tool. It's not perfect. It has tons of problems. Maybe there are other better tools that we could have used. Please let us know. We would love actually to know and to consider them for future iterations or even changing over time. Okay? But we're going to understand the system that we're dealing with on these particular interventions, right, related to rethinking democracy centered in agency and influencing climate action and energy transition. We're going to talk about how do we build the strategies around these very complex challenges. How is it that you, from your own corner of the world, maybe you are a health specialist or a nutrition specialist, can actually contribute to those conversations from your own sector? Define that desired change, make a few strategic options. We are going to have to make choices and live with them, take responsibility for them, and identify the smallest viable actions. What are concrete things, even if it's small, that can actually help us position the strategy? What does it mean? Garner support, building trust, overcoming the potential of challenge by people that are currently benefiting of the status quo. We're going to be talking about the state capture and corruption, for example, at some point, or challenges related to governance, right? Like all within a framework of understanding and building change while working within systems. But the most important part of this audience is that all that knowledge, all that thing that is going to be systematized in Miro boards, all right, is then going to be condensed, analyzed, and translated into a contribution, right? One particular publication where every person that has contributed to the different sections will be acknowledged as co-author if they want to. And this will be a shared publication that we're going to take to a number of different fora and that we're going to put out there for the consideration of a lot of people that are working actively at a macro level on making things happen, making change happen. So when the class ends in May, that doesn't stop. Everything that has been produced during this course will be synthesized and actively used as a baseline in-person hybrid co-creation workshops that we will have during the summer. The first ones, so you actually know, and maybe you contact your friends in your network, right? Like, because we would love to partner with different organizations on this. The first ones are going to be in Zambia, in Morocco, and in the Philippines between May and June. We are interested in organizing in at least 3 other places, at least one of them in Latin America. And the idea is to bring together students from the course from those countries with people from our larger network, which we call the Governance Explorers Network, that are based in those countries, and other friends of the program that are interested in participating in an exercise like this. This is not about redoing what people have been doing or thinking about for years. It's precisely how do we build on what has already been done and attempted. And most importantly, it's not about showing off that we have the right answer when others, maybe the experts or people that have a lot of experience of this, have not been able to push for change. This is not about bragging rights or not even about being right. It's about how do we contribute to the conversation and how do we identify concrete things that we can do from our own quarters. I have been teaching for small groups of people for many years. This is an opportunity to take that conversation further, to change very much the dynamic of the conversation. I hope you consider joining us, or at least suggesting us how to do this better, because we don't have necessarily the best answers. We're very cognizant of that. I'm going to take a very short break while people are finishing in the groups, right? And we'll be back. Alessandra, how much more time do we have before bringing them back?
As much as you want.
Another what?
As much as you want.
So let's plan it for, like, since you send them, for it to be 10 to 11 minutes.
All right. Sounds good.
Right? If you can send them, like, I don't know if it is possible, like a message. Sometimes I say that you can send a message in 60 seconds, the room is going to close. It would be amazing.
Perfect.
And great, then we bring them, and that's it. I'm just going to take a quick break, turn off my camera, and be right back. All right? I need more water, not only coffee. See you in a bit, everybody. Please don't leave us. I mean, it's about to get good. See. All right, Ale, how are we doing? How much more time you will say?
I think we are almost, yeah, we reached the time. So, yeah, I can close it if you want.
Yeah, maybe just give them a heads up of 30
Yeah,
seconds.
yeah, yeah. All right, I will go
Perfect.
in.
Let's do that. And when I see that people are, just confirm that people have returned, and we'll continue. In the meantime, I'm sharing a couple of slides also with people that may join us or see this streaming later, right? Like keeping in mind, right? Like we are going to have these conversations, right? And we're talking about complex problems, not complicated problems. And this is just to give you a sense of like, why is it that we frame it in this way, the conversation? Why is it important in the end? What we're going to do is like, we're going to enter this section. When we start talking about and taking it from behavioral complexity to actually strategic positioning. Very well. Just let me know when we are back, Ale. While people are coming back, I'm just going to emphasize one more point from the first class, right? Which is very important. And is the need, and sadly, the way that something that we are still missing very much, and is empathy between all different participants and people working in development from different areas.
So all the breakout rooms are closed now, Mario.
Okay, people are back?
Yes.
Fantastic. Welcome back, team. I'm very thankful for you, like patience. Hopefully this has been useful. Let us know, please. We cannot be in every single room, right? Like hopefully you have seen a bit of the diversity of people in the room, right? And that is also helpful. But if you see that something is not working, right, in terms of like the process or like the dynamics, let us know. That's important feedback for us. Maybe we can always try something different, maybe larger groups, maybe smaller groups. Maybe directly having the group work on the middle board, right, over time and having one facilitator. Like, we're open, but we need feedback from you. Otherwise, we cannot improve. Thank you very much. So, Alessandra, just want to make sure, can people talk freely?
Yeah. Yes. I have to unmute them. Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we have anybody that would like to go first and share what you discuss on your group? Please, especially if you decided on one representative, and Alessandra will give you the way, like
Yeah.
to share with us. Please start by stating your name, the country you are connecting from, and tell us about what your group discussed.
Just raise your hand, please. Thank you.
I don't even know what the button is for raising your hand, by the way. I'm sure
It's a very button. Yeah, it's a very bottom of the screen.
at the bottom of the screen. Okay.
Yeah, little
So
hand.
people, please feel free to participate. Otherwise, we'll call on you. Don't be shy. I have been there. I understand. Thank you. We have there a brave person, extra brave person.
Kevin, you can talk now.
Mukweg, can you talk? I know that sometimes there are connection issues, so we'll understand also. But you can unmute your microphone and share with us. Mukweg, are you there?
Are you able to hear me?
Now I can. Thank you, Mukweg. Appreciate it. Thanks for being the first.
All right, thank you so much. I've had to raise my hand. My name is Mugwe Kevin. I'm joining the class from Nairobi, Kenya.
Welcome.
Now, I wasn't able to join a group, but I found it interesting to pick a program and maybe try and raise it up so that also we can be able to discuss it.
Mhm.
So a microfinance program, and
Okay.
the first question on the basis of on the first question that you had asked on the microfinance program, I was able to figure out one of the three things. That is the behavioral change beneath the policy surface. The first one is um, at the policy when we're introducing a microfinance program, and specifically in Kenya, we're doing programs like table banking, we usually have an assumption that the borrowers are going to refund back the money. But in real sense, that is what we have on the policy. But in real sense, when we actually implement the program, we find that the money does not circle back to be given to another person who might need it. The other factor that also we might address is that we tend at the policy level when you're designing a development project for financial inclusion program or a microfinance program, you'll tend to assume that if I give for in a case and point, if I give to groups or if I give to youth groups or women groups or whatever it is that you've grouped them, that these groups are going to be profitable in whatever they do with the particular investment you have given, which in most cases it's not the case. And another area maybe I'd want to address under the behavioral challenge that we have is you usually assume that when you're introducing a microfinance program that that apart from the we've said apart that these people have the financial knowledge on how to run this particular program. That becomes that is another behavior that sometimes is bypassed, and it comes and ends up now blocking the entire project. So you might find even the project itself does not, because you had an assumption, and the initial point will have been maybe to start and create a situation whereby you actually you stop assuming that your beneficiaries are going to be financial literate. Um, on the next point, on the next thing you're supposed to, that is who is affected by the behavior constraint. I think the first person affected is actually the program itself. Before the program itself gets affected and gets to be non-responsive. So you find yourself having a very good program that would have helped in development and will have taken a community or society into the next level, but you find that it has crashed or it has gone down. The same people, the beneficiaries in that community, will be very affected and they will be constrained. Briefly, also, I'm going to write about who must support the effort. So the effort has to be from both sides. That is the designer of the development program itself, the policy makers, that is the institutions, and also the beneficiaries. Those are the ones who are actually, if you can learn together before you design a microfinance program, you are able to understand from what angle of the policy you're driving at, how are you developing your policy to ensure that it's going to be successful, and how are you going to ensure that every beneficiary, every person is going to be better to see this to benefit from this particular policy development is going to benefit from it. So that is how I've been able to address that particular point. And the last one is why will the actors realistically join you? Because number one, you're talking about financial inclusion. You're talking about developing economies. In Kenya, we have seen how possible it is to do microfinance program, especially with table banking. Women in rural areas who could not access banking solutions are able to run finance and lending and financial inclusion programs that are running up to millions of shillings. So it is possible, and having people believe, actors, all the actors believe that this is actually possible and doable, then it's going to work effectively. Thank you.
Mugwe, thank you so much. That was so rich, right? Like in with direct connection to many experiences or things that you have seen or experienced in Kenya. We appreciate it very much. And I'm sure that if we were this route and we start exchanging with the experience of microfinance in, say, Andhra Pradesh, right? Like, or in Bangladesh, compared to Peru and Bolivia, right? Like we will find many similitudes, but also many differences and challenges that are based precisely on how typically are things done and what is it that takes precedence, right? The experience in particular of in India and also in Bangladesh, but in India in particular, has shaped a lot the change in microfinance from one particular type of intervention based on a very limited assumption, right? That basically people want to be entrepreneurs, first of all, and second, that people will actually take the money like immediately and rapidly. And we see that it's not necessarily the case from Pakistan to India to Kenya. I have had the opportunity of working a lot on the microfinance side of things, and see how social norms, for example, can affect very much how far you can get with a microfinance program, and how nowadays microfinance programs take more of an ecosystem approach to the problem. We'll share an insert with you guys. It's a short slide deck on the evolution of microfinance, because it's an example precisely of how things have evolved over time in the thinking. And it's not just a process of doing more research or more impact evaluations. It's also the response to social challenges in the implementation of microfinance programs, right? And that has added, for example, issues related like insurance or like checks and balances, for example, when people try to get back the money, etc., etc. We want one more participant, please, particularly if your group was discussing intimate partner violence or oil subsidies. We would like to hear from you. Alessandra, please, if you help us get there, that will be very helpful.
Yes, of course. Daria.
Thank you, Daria. Welcome.
Thank you so much. My name is Daria. I'm from Ukraine, and our team discussed the intimate partner violence prevention program. And as we realized, the main challenge is that people may not report violence or may not leave this violent relationship even when help exists. So why this problem exists? It's because victims can always fear for their lives, can feel shame, normalization in the society, because in some communities there's still the narrative that even if there's violence in the family, it is normal. There's also can be a dependency from your partner, for example, like money, housing, immigration status, or low trust in police, courts, and other social services. So the problem isn't just provide services, it must change safety, norms, and trust. If to answer the question, who is affected or behaviorally constrained with this? First of all, these are survivors and victims, mostly women, but not only, because it may be trapped by fear, finances, or family pressure. There's also children who can be affected by violence directly when they can see these kind of behaviors in their families, and it also influences a lot their mental states. There are also communities who are affected by these, like neighbors, family, friends. They can always and often see the signs of the violence happening in the family, but they can not report because in some communities it's still something considered sacred, and that is a lot of intimate that's happening in other families. So if we talk about who must support it, we decided that, first of all, these can be local leaders and communities to shift norms and make help accessible, even though that some victims, they do not report this, and some people can see that this is happening. That's where changes happens and where it starts from the bottom. Then there's like police and justice system for protection and tackling the consequences of the problems. And also there's a huge role in social services, for example, safety planning, housing, legal aid, because some victims are really afraid to seek this help from police and this legal and justice system, because they think that it's not just, it can help. And in some communities, again, when this violence is really normalized, the victim can't seek help in this field. So if we talk about who may block this, we decided that most of the time it's like traditional and religious narratives that still exist in some societies where your partner is considered as the head of a family and that you have to like stay behind your partner and do everything that partner says you and can't say something against this. And also a huge pressure from the society, from the family, even though they want to help you, still it's really difficult to seek this help because it's pretty normalized. We didn't have time to answer the last question, but I would say that why people have to join, for example, survivors and communities, because it will create a safe space for families to exist, for victims to part in this in the solution of this problem and seek help for themselves from this problem and be able to exit this violent relationship and seek help for like money, housing, and other aid and legal support. If you talk about policy and health workers, for example, they can build the policy around protection of the victims and again helping people get out of this violent relationship. Thank you so much.
Daria, fantastic. Thank you. The whole point of this exercise is to notice the different perspectives on the same problem, many times also conditioned and shaped by the particular reality that we live. And we can talk much more, and we will talk much more about intimate partner violence prevention too. I invite you also to look at one particular resource course, the Preventive Collaborative. It is an effort that I remember like very dearly being in the initial discussions about that particular preventive through some work that we were doing while I was working at 3IE, the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation years ago. And that has become a whole effort to try to share experiences and lessons from different countries in tackling this particular problem and looking at these different layers, right? Like you talk about many of the key players. Then if you have an overarching like culture where misogyny, for example, in social media is so spread and widespread, right? Like, which is both a cause and a symptom, right, of normalizing certain behaviors, right? The challenge is huge, and we definitely need to act at different levels and in coordination between different actors. We'll talk more about this. I just want to say, everyone, this is just an example of the things that we're going to be looking at. Next class, and then the class after that, every class, I'm going to be talking less. I promise you, because otherwise you're not going to stick around. But second, because the most important thing is to have these kind of conversations more in depth. I know that many of you have to leave. I know that many left even before the exercise started, because that happens. I have done it too, right? Like, and it's hard just to keep like connected, etc. But I thank you for being here, even if for part of it. And I hope that you see this recording. I want you to know that next week, we're going to be talking about stakeholder engagement. How is it that we connect, we discuss, we address, we work with civil society, private sector, and government? And more importantly, how is it that we work together with them? How is it that we build coalitions, collaboration between different sectors, keeping in mind these different incentives and behaviors of different actors? I'm going to be very much looking forward for that. Tomorrow, Thursday, you will receive not only the material for this class, but already the readings and prompt questions for the Miro board for the class of next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, we're also going to be looking at all the feedback that you have been provided on the Miro board, the JOT form, and also new questions that you may have based on the content of today or of previous sessions in it. We're going to be talking about this. We're going to be talking about who is affected, but also who must be brought on board, who should join. Understand that in the end, we're not helping or supporting just an abstract category like the poor, right? Like we are engaging with actors that are trapped inside constrained environments, either because of social norms, because of cognitive bandwidth scarcity that we talk about today, or because of network isolation. And how is it that we can apply these things to discussions related to democracy and climate? Much more to come. But when you think about who do we need to bring on board for these particular problems, think about these different categories. There are many more. These are just names. Typically, we only think of gatekeepers. But who are the norm enforcers? Who shapes the narrative, right? Who dominates the conversation in that sense? Where are these cluster nodes that we talked about before? So we'll talk much about this. Related to this, when you do a strategy, I'm going to leave you with this thought, and you may think that is controversial. It's also exclusive. It's also generally some exclusion, and we have to be aware of that. Because when we position, right, like we have to choose a particular way to address behavior, like which norms to contest, which norms to which expectations to shift, which coalitions to build. We cannot do everything, but we can do more if we work together. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. Hopefully you join us back. Bring a friend, tell others that you know that have signed up for this class or that may benefit from it. We hope that you can join us and you can contribute to shaping the future of development. See you next time.